At Five Star Bank, community is at the heart of what we do. Every day we strive to have thoughtful solutions for our customers and help our communities prosper. Honest dialogue about the issues affecting the region is vitally important to that prosperity. We are proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
Fictional ad man Don Draper said, "Advertising is based on one thing, happiness." AMC's Mad Men tells the saga of the talented yet tortured Draper and his colleagues as post-war America is revealed through the sometimes uncomfortable mirror that the advertising business and its practitioners hold up to our country's soul. Joining us today are some of our area's own Mad Men. Ad agency professionals Carol Gleason of Misfit, Bob Ben of Seraph and Ben, and Paul McClure of Runyon, Saltzman, and Einhorn. Let's talk about how ad agencies influence what we buy, what we seek, and what it tells us about who we are. But before we get into that, I've got to ask you guys a question. Do you ad folks really drink that much, like on the show?
I know Paul does.
I think the business has always been very social. You have a lot of very highly energized people, type A personalities, spending a lot of time together, and for some odd reason it's always been part of the icebreaker, part of the creative stimulation, and part of the socialization of the business.
I have to say though, boy, you know, when I watch that show, I'm like, how do those folks do it?
I think not so much during the day, you know, like is depicted on Ad Men, although I'm told back in the day that was the norm, you know, for people to actually have bars in their office and use them.
Really?
Yeah. So
Wow.
I'm not quite that old, but I do recall.
You encountered one or two of those folks?
Yeah, those
Sleeping
people.
under their desk, I remember that.
Uh-huh.
Not personally, but...
So, you know, the show itself talks a lot about not just the business and the people, but sort of the psychology behind advertising. And I was wondering, what is the essence of great advertising?
I think where it is today and where it was, say, in the 60s are somewhat two different places. In the 60s, it was all about, very much more about an education of a product. And I think today it's much more about finding what it is consumers are going to respond to, because there is so much thrown at consumers now. It was a much smaller world in the ad world and the media world back in the 60s, or the heydays of the Mad Men. So any exposure was pretty much a unique exposure. And today, with the amount of clutter, the amount of messages out there, good advertising and the essence of it is much more important to kind of reach somebody inside.
Well, Carol, that's emotional. Well, it's
connection.
interesting. It's interesting about that because you read sometimes that advertising is dead and that it's a wasted expenditure of money because social media and things like that, people want authenticity, and they, you know, and that the recommendation of a friend is far more relevant than something that they see that's
TV spot.
Yeah. How do you deal with that, Carol?
It's a challenge, and again, it's knowing what consumers are going to react to, what they're going to connect with as well, what's appropriate. I still believe that everything has a role. It just has a slightly different role, and they all work together now.
And Bob, you know, going back to the days of you know, in your history, World Electronics, Bill Graham Presents, all that sort of thing, the evolution of the business itself. I mean, what carries through from back when you started in this business to today?
Well,
He's saying you're old.
he is,
Yeah.
and
But distinguished.
and he's right,
But distinguished.
but distinguished. So, you know, the essence of advertising, you know, whether you're selling concert tickets or cars or stereos back in the day, you still have to reach, you know, the target demographic with the allotted amount of money you're given. And hopefully you're able to do it with a compelling message so that people respond and, you know, and react in a positive way, i.e. come buy something, you know. So Seraph and Ben has always been a fairly retail-oriented agency, and, you know, our results are pretty much bottom line oriented. You know, you spend some money, you made some money, hopefully. So,
Right. And you did a lot of work in the concert business with Bill Graham and folks like that. That business in itself, just the entire business models have changed in terms of that, you know, you've got all these different marketing opportunities and all that.
Yeah.
Is it hard, are ad agencies still involved with the entire scope of businesses like that, or or is everyone more specialized?
Well, you know, the big concert business, you know, those companies pretty much became mega companies. You know, there's like 3 or 4 of them that do 90% of the tours now. So it's not like when you had regional, you know, a Bill Graham that focused in Northern California. You know, it's these guys that, you know, packaged the big tours together. And so that's definitely changed quite a bit.
Sounds more corporate, actually.
It's very corporate, yeah, much like radio has changed into, and television for that matter. Yeah.
And I think a big part, agencies played a much bigger role in corporate America, I think 30 years ago. Corporations started bringing in MBAs, marketing experts, and a large part of what agencies were counted on back in the 60s and 70s started to go away. I wouldn't say we're necessarily specialized so much, but a big part of the marketing function and aspects have gone away out of the agency
like what?
business.
Like what?
Agencies used to track, you know, product movement, sales. They'd look at movement by market, things of that nature. Most of that's an in-house function, and a lot of agencies aren't brought into that part of it. Aspects of privacy have come into play too, where agencies were much more an integral part of that client's business. Now we kind of get it on somewhat of a need-to-know basis.
Well, actually, it's interesting because one of the things back on the show a couple seasons ago on Mad Men, there was the introduction of a woman who was the big data woman,
Yes.
right?
Yes, that was the
doctor.
Yeah, the doctor, and that was the research function. I think that's something that's very much changed from those days, and that was the kind of starting point of it was no longer, oh, do we all think this is a great idea, and it's very, you know, insular, to, okay, what do the people think of it? And that was her role there. Yeah.
It's interesting though, because so that data is no longer done within the agencies, but that's more something that corporations do in
Well, there's a little of each. Certainly, on behalf of clients, agencies may perform some primary research. Today, with the advent of technology, there's a lot more syndicated research available. There's things available at your fingertips.
So what is it that you guys do today that's different to kind of make up for how that's gone away?
There's a lot more applying of a science into this. There's still a nature of kind of trusting your instincts, consumer knowledge, experience, cumulative experience that's put into play, but there is a lot more information available. So we can kind of take that, work with, you know, analytical data as well as just kind of our intuition and expertise and instincts.
But you know, Bob, when you talk about all of this data and everything else, I think about the ads that resonate with me that I remember. The other night I went and saw this movie on Steve Jobs, and in the movie they debuted the 1984 commercial. That's one that people remember. You know, there was one in the 60s where there was a Native American who had litter thrown at his feet. People remember that, or this is your brain on drugs. For some of us of an era, we all remember
Yes.
we all remember that.
Yes.
What is coming out today? Has there been anything recently with all this fractionalization of media and chopping everybody up into 500 channels? Can any of you think of an ad recently that's captured the imagination of the American people like those?
The one that I remember, not recently, but a few years ago, was the Budweiser, the Was Up. I mean, that captured it. I mean, I think also everyone, and this is what advertising is about now, it is personalised. So everyone's going to like something different, pick up something. And I think great advertising has the ability to kind of circumnavigate that and bring everyone together over a one thing. And I think that was, was it comedy, or it was just something that everyone could relate to, whether you were young or old or whatever it was. So
Yeah, the big brands have the money to
Yeah.
throw at stuff like that. Like Budweiser doesn't really need to sell beer; they're just selling image, so they can spend their whole time not necessarily, selling the attributes of drinking a Bud, but doing an emotional heartstring, like similar with the Clydesdale commercial they did recently. But Bud's very good at that, and their Bud Light brand is very
Yeah.
good too.
I think another example of that, the hard thing is because we all like to talk, so
It's all
you did
good.
say
It's all good.
Yeah, interrupt, but I think another one, advertising does more than just advertising. They have a role to play in society, and I think from a female's perspective, Dove has done really well with that, about making it clear that it's okay to look a different way than a model. So I think they have a different responsibility, and people really enjoy that and respect that. And research has shown if a brand is socially responsible, then people are going to have a better relationship with that brand.
With that Dove commercial,
Yes.
one of the things it looks like is that seems like one of those rare occasions where something really connects
Yes,
at
and
a very
that's
personal level.
great advertising when it connects.
Yeah, and that's the
Yeah.
part too where it isn't so much you need this product, it's an understanding of how people use
Yeah.
it, how they feel about themselves, how this product will work into their lives. And pulling that off in a very natural way is usually what makes for good advertising.
Have you seen, Paul, have you ever seen an ad, or one that you can remember, where even though it's from a professional like yourself, you say, God, that one really got me. That one got me.
There's one and we probably all remember it, and it's a commercial. Ironically, it only ran one time a year, and it ran every year for a number of years on the Super Bowl, and it was the Master Lock ad, where you saw a lock hanging against a backdrop of a bullseye, and a bullet goes through it, and the lock remains locked. And it's something that in such a simple way, it sticks with you, and it probably hasn't run in 20 years yet. So many of us remember that, and its strength and its power in that, and what it conveys about that lock and that
Bob,
brand.
do you have a favorite one of yours that you say, man, I would have loved to have created that ad?
No, I have hundreds actually. So yeah, I really can't narrow it down to one. But yeah, I'm actually I'm a consumer of all kinds of pop culture, and I consider advertising, a big form of pop culture. So I pay attention to ads, not just because it's my business, but I always have. Even when I
How
was
did
a
you get
kid.
into this business anyway?
How did I get into this business? I was working for a hi-fi chain, Sun Stereo, which, even that category of business isn't around anymore. But they, every 6 months, would fire their ad guy, and I was working on the floor trying to sell stereos. So I said, well, I'll be the ad guy. And everybody's going, no, you don't want to do that, because for one thing, you don't know anything about it, and for the other thing, you'll get fired in 6 months. So I accepted the ad position.
And 6 months later?
I was still there, but the company, let's see, 5 years later was not there. But I was still there. So actually, I learned a heck of a lot on the fly right there.
And what about you, Paul?
I found this business. I took a marketing class in college, and it was probably the first course I took where something really started to I could feel something inside. the subject matter, the problem solving, the things that were going on, I just seemed to kind of naturally take to. And I turned that into, I started going to work at the campus radio station as the business and sales manager, and that's when I found out about the world of ad agencies and advertising, and was fortunate upon graduation to get into the business, and I haven't turned my back on it.
But what was it about that turned you on? What did you fall in love with?
The challenge of really, a marketing challenge. Seeing that there's a business that has a need, that has something they're trying to solve, and that there is a process and a way to go about doing that. Not always the same, but there just seemed to be both a common sense, a practicality, as well as a science to it that really just appealed to me.
And Carol, You come from New Zealand, okay,
Yes.
and you started out there.
You noticed my accent wasn't from here.
I thought it might have been Brooklyn or something
Yeah.
else. But and so is the business, when you were starting out in the business back there, is the business the same as it is over here, stateside?
It's the same but different. There's a lot of differences. I think the sheer size of the US makes it different. Because I think other areas and other countries are a lot more nimble because the size of them is smaller, so you can turn it around quicker than you can this big tanker to make a change. It's very, very different. I started out in Saatchi & Saatchi, and where it was like the biggest brand known in New Zealand, and they used to do their own advertising on TV. So I caught the passion through that and was lucky enough to get a job, and the rest is history. But a lot of differences between other places.
Going back to the show for just a second, one of the things that many of us relate to are the sort of triumphs and struggles that Peggy goes through.
Love
And as a woman trying to make it in that business in that era.
Yes.
What's the reality in terms of your own experience about being a woman in this business?
In my own and observing others, it's very true. I mean, obviously we've come a little way from the 60s, but I think it's very true. It is a male-dominated business. It's a little bit better in this country than New Zealand and Australia and
How
Europe.
so?
You have to make the decision there. It's a lot younger. It's a younger, more trendy, more pushing the envelope industry than it is in America. In America, it's a lot more corporate. So over there, you have a choice. I can have a family, or I can have a career.
Really?
It's very, I could count on one hand the females that have actually made it, and their husband doesn't work and they have a nanny, and it's hard. It's very hard. It's a hard business.
We were talking about this earlier, and I'd say one of the things I've appreciated about the ad business is I felt it was one of the more progressive industries in terms of the hiring of women being able to own their own ad agencies, rise to senior positions at a pace far better than the rest of, say, corporate America. And I in fact now work for a women-owned ad agency. And
why do you think that is?
I think a lot of things. Some of what Bob was saying is, this is about our culture, our society, and this is a business that has to stay on the forefront of it. And if you track kind of almost the women's movement in America, this business was on the forefront of that. And I think there's a lot of parallels.
Well, that raises a question, though. Bob, does advertising really mirror the country, or does it lead it? Or does it follow it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it does all those things. I think really cutting edge advertising leads it, and then most advertising follows. Wouldn't you say?
I agree. I think that's a good way to.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at sort of general ad content today, what is it that sort of impressions? Any one of you can answer this. What impressions about the country, about where we're at today, does sort of like, if you were to look at just kind of the mass of advertising, tell us about who we are and what we are today?
I think there's an underlying movement of family and coming together. That's for me, and maybe it's, again, every ad should be targeted. So I see the ones, hopefully if the advertiser and the communications people have done their job right, I see family, because that's kind of where I'm at the moment. But it is very much that cocooning, coming home, the plethora of HDTV kind of shows, and it's all about, being happy with your domain, essentially. But maybe that's just what I see.
I do, and I agree. I think the majority of advertising, good advertising, should track somewhat with consumer attitudes, confidence, things of that. There's a lot of bad advertising out there. There's a lot of advertising that we in the industry are almost ashamed of, or embarrassed to admit that it's in the industry that we're in, and the three of us have no part in creating that kind of work.
Obviously not.
No.
There's I would say about every third ad right now is a mobile phone ad. So that says something about the society and where we are right now too, I think.
In terms of what we're focused on, what's important
Exactly.
to us.
Yeah.
That's
keeping
it.
in touch.
Keeping.
Again, it's all about, it's about family togetherness, keeping involved.
And sharing.
And sharing.
And
yes.
sharing, and sharing. Has there been anything to come out of Sacramento? Has there been any advertising that was birthed here in Sacramento that really had an impact on the national scene? Anything?
Oh, yes, the clapper, right?
Wow.
Did you know that?
Really?
I that came out of.
Yeah, the clapper.
Was that one of yours?
No. No.
I have no idea what the clapper is.
The clap on, clap off, clapper.
You haven't?
Oh, the lamb.
So that's probably not the example you were going
Well,
for, but I did know that.
That was
So-
meaningful to
There's
the
a-
one group of consumers.
There's a lot of very high quality work
Yeah.
coming out of this market. The whether it makes it onto a national scale is going to be far more related to, say, the budget, the scope of a client's business, and things of that nature. So it could be the best ad created in America that's running in Sacramento, and it probably won't travel much further if the client's
Right.
business isn't nationwide, or they're running network television or something else of that nature.
How is the business changing with regards to traditional types of distribution channels, print, radio, television versus online? Now, a couple of years ago, it was thought that online was going to be all the rage and everything would migrate off of the networks and everything else. What's the reality in terms of how your focus on distribution is changing?
Boy, it's gotten a lot more complex, but better in a lot of ways. We talked earlier, you had mentioned some of the real renowned commercials. A big part of that was there were 3 networks at the time, and if you ran a commercial, 30, 40 million people would see that, whether they wanted to see it or not. Now, through the plethora of outlets and channels and online, we have the ability to be far more targeted than ever before. If we knew specific demographics or lifestyles or habits about somebody, we can reach them specifically. So it doesn't generate the millions and mass impressions that we had before, but we can be much more focused.
So does that mean, though, that it's impossible to reach everybody at the same time except on the Super Bowl?
Well,
Yeah, it's very difficult. Fragmentation is huge, and that's, you mentioned the online or internet advertising, and if you think, 120 TV channels is fragmentation, think about the internet.
But I also think we don't want to reach everyone either, because
Really?
our product is not, or whatever we happen to be advertising, is not for everyone. And I think, one of the things I'd like people to know, that this business is actually, it requires an amount of, intelligence, outside of drinking. And that's part of our job, is to figure out, okay, well, who is the core target audience? And we joke, we don't want it to be everyone, because then it's very hard to do our job when you're trying to, attract everyone. So I think it's different. It's very different.
I think you still could reach most everyone. It would just take a lot more than just running a TV spot or things like that.
And certain companies can reach everyone. McDonald's and Burger King and Pepsi-Cola and Coca-Cola. They can reach everyone, but they have the money to do everything.
And they also have different communication for different audience as well. So again, they're reaching everyone, but they have this for this, and it's very, very targeted. So
in terms of age, reaching different ages, is there a difference between how you market to someone who's in their late 40s, early 50s, and someone who's 18?
There absolutely is, because we obviously watch and view and listen to different things, but you can do it by age, you can do it by that insight that we're looking for, that thing that's going to connect people. So there's different ways to do it.
What is among, just top of mind, what is the most effective way to reach young people, the millennials and below?
Having something very, very clever and smart. I think you asked a question before, how is it different? It's made our job harder, because we have to be smarter, because they're smarter and they will turn you off immediately if they don't like it. So
Well, there's that, and then there's where. Where you deliver the message. You know, that's the really ever-changing, difficult part of our job right now, is trying to determine
Yeah.
the most efficient way of reaching certain demos, and the young one in particular.
But it may be, I mean, if you've got a really clever idea that could live anywhere, it doesn't have to be it doesn't just have to be the internet. If you've got something that's happening out in the community, you could have like a billboard that could work as well, but it would have to be done very differently and very clever.
All right.
Yeah.
And we're going to leave it there. Well, that's our show. Thanks to our guest, and thanks to you for watching Studio Sacramento. I'm Scott Syfax. See you next time right here on KVIE.
At Five Star Bank, community is at the heart of what we do. Every day we strive to have thoughtful solutions for our customers and help our communities prosper. Honest dialogue about the issues affecting the region is vitally important to that prosperity. We are proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
All episodes of Studio Sacramento, along with other KVIE programs, are available to watch online at kvie.org/video.